Sarah adjusted her glasses, the fluorescent hum of the office a familiar drone. Another Tuesday, another spreadsheet, another utterly unremarkable day, except for the dream. It had started subtly, a wispy, easily dismissed fragment of subconscious nonsense, but lately it had become a recurring, insistent presence, a stark white canvas painted with the deepest dread. It was always the same. She was in a hospital, not a normal, sterile but manageable hospital, but a vast, unending expanse of clinical white. Corridors stretched into infinity, bathed in an impossibly bright yet shadowless light. The air tasted of antiseptic and something else, something metallic and cold, like fear. There were no windows, no visible exits, just endless doors, all identical, all closed. She was never alone exactly. Distant, indistinct figures moved through the periphery of her vision, like ghosts caught in a perpetual loop, never quite solid. Enough to be real, yet always there. A low, persistent hum vibrated through the floor, a sound that seemed to resonate deep within her bones. It wasn't the sound of machinery, more like the steady thrum of a monstrous, unseen heart. And then the voice. It wasn't loud, but it was omnipresent, echoing from the pristine walls, from the very air itself. A calm, measured, disembodied voice, devoid of emotion, yet filled with an unsettling authority. It said simply, "You've been admitted." Every time Sarah would wake up in a cold sweat, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She'd rub her eyes, take a deep breath, and tell herself it was just a dream. A vivid one, yes, but still just a dream. Until this morning, she'd woken up with a throbbing headache, a dull ache behind her right temple. She dismissed it as a result of poor sleep or perhaps too much screen time. But as she splashed water on her face, she caught sight of herself in the bathroom mirror. Just above her eyebrow, a faint purplish bruise bloomed. It was small, barely noticeable, but it was there. And suddenly, the dream slammed back into her with visceral clarity. In the dream, just before she woke, she had been pushed or had stumbled. She couldn't remember the exact details, only the jarring impact, a fleeting pain, and then the familiar jolt of consciousness. Now, the bruise was undeniable. Sarah stared at her reflection, a knot forming in her stomach. Her initial reaction was disbelief, then a chilling wave of unease. This was impossible. Dreams didn't leave physical marks. Did they? She tried to shake it off, to rationalize it away. Maybe she'd bumped her head in her sleep. Maybe she'd walked into a doorframe on her way to the bathroom, still half asleep. She picked up her phone, scrolling through her news feed, desperate for a distraction. That's when she saw it, a headline from a local news outlet, tucked away. In the oddities section, recurring white hospital dream reported by dozens. Sarah's breath hitched. She clicked on it, her fingers trembling slightly. The article described the same sterile, endless corridors, the same pervasive sense of dread, the same chilling phrase, "You've been admitted." And then the kicker. Many report waking with unexplained aches, pains, and even minor injuries, seemingly mirroring experiences within the dream. Sarah felt a cold dread spread through her. It wasn't just her, it was happening to others. Dozens, the article said. But as she scrolled further, she saw comments, thousands of them, from people around the world. Instagram posts with hashtags like White Hospital Dream, our dream injury. Twitter threads exploding with terrified testimonials. Someone in London reported a twisted ankle after falling in their dream. A woman in Tokyo woke with a faint burn mark on her arm after a dream incident involving a scalding pipe. The collective anxiety was palpable, even through the screen. Initial skepticism from authorities was evident in the news reports. Mass hysteria, some doctors suggested. A curious case of shared psychological phenomenon, said others. But the sheer volume and consistency of the reports, not to mention the tangible physical evidence, began to erode that skepticism. Across the ocean, in a brightly lit lab humming with the soft whir of advanced machinery, Dr. Aris Thorne leaned, back in his ergonomic chair, a tablet resting on his lap. He was a neuroscientist renowned for his groundbreaking work in consciousness studies and the mechanics of sleep. He'd initially dismissed the White Hospital dream as another internet fad, a collective delusion fueled by viral trends. But the data was piling up. He wasn't one to ignore data. His assistant, a brilliant but perpetually anxious young man named Ben, hovered by the door. "Another 50 reports, Dr. Thorne," Ben said, his voice a little too high-pitched. "And the details are disturbingly consistent. The antiseptic smell, the endless corridors, the disembodied voice. Even the specific locations of some of the injuries are identical across multiple subjects." Dr. Thorne pushed his glasses up his nose, his gaze fixed on the screen. He scrolled through charts and graphs, brainwave patterns submitted by volunteers, anecdotal accounts from around the globe. The initial dismissal was giving way to a profound, almost unsettling intrigue. This wasn't just mass hysteria. This was something new, something extraordinary, and terrifying. He felt a thrill of intellectual curiosity, quickly tempered by a deep sense of foreboding. This wasn't just a dream. This was a phenomenon, and it was just beginning. The faint purplish bruise above Sarah's eyebrow was just the beginning. Within a week, her nights became a living torment, each dream a descent deeper into the sterile hell of the White Hospital. The injuries she sustained there, once minor and easily dismissed, grew in severity and frequency. One night she dreamed of being slammed against a cold metallic wall, the impact sending a jolt of pain through her ribs. She woke gasping, a sharp stabbing ache in her side. A visit to the doctor confirmed it, a hairline fracture on her 10th rib. The doctor, a harried woman with dark circles under her eyes, looked at Sarah with a mixture of sympathy and bewilderment. "Another one," she muttered, not to Sarah but to herself, as if the phrase was an incantation of despair. Sarah's life began to unravel. Sleep, once a refuge, was now a source of terror. She dreaded closing her eyes, but the exhaustion became overwhelming. Her work performance plummeted. Her social life, already minimal, evaporated. She spent her days in a haze of pain and fear, her nights in a perpetual cycle of dread and injury. The hum of the dream hospital seemed to follow her into her waking hours, a phantom vibration that set her teeth on edge. The antiseptic smell, too, would occasionally waft through her apartment, a phantom scent that made her stomach clench. The news, once filled with dismissive reports, now screamed headlines of panic. Dream sickness spreads globally, hospitals overwhelmed by unexplained injuries, the nightmare pandemic. The initial scientific skepticism had been shattered by the sheer, undeniable reality of the phenomenon. People were waking with burns, deep lacerations, dislocated joints, even fractured limbs. It wasn't psychosomatic. The injuries were real, verifiable, and excruciatingly painful. The world watched in horror as the dream hospital's grip tightened. Governments, initially slow to react, were now in a state of frantic disarray. Emergency declarations became commonplace. Public service announcements urged calm, but fear was a wildfire consuming sanity. Airports were shut down, borders closed. Quarantines were implemented in areas with high concentrations of reported cases, but the dream knew no physical boundaries. It struck randomly, indiscriminately, infecting minds across continents. Entire cities became ghost towns as people, terrified of falling asleep, tried to stay awake or succumbed to their injuries. Dr. Aris Thorne's lab, once a quiet sanctuary of intellectual pursuit, became a hive of frantic activity. Sleep-deprived and driven by an almost manic intensity, he led a rapidly assembled international task force. Data poured in from every corner of the globe: MRI scans, EEG readings, physiological responses, detailed dream logs. He was looking for patterns, for commonalities beyond the obvious. Was there a specific brain region activated during the dream, a unique chemical signature? He suspected a shared neurological event, something unprecedented. His team, a mix of neuroscientists, psychologists, and even computational linguists analyzing the dream reports, worked around the clock. They catalogued every reported injury, every detail of the dreamscape. The hum in the dream, the constant white, the feeling of being observed, the precise wording of "you've been admitted." These were universal constants. Thorne was particularly fascinated by the consistency of the injuries. A fall in the dream consistently resulted in a bruised hip or a sprained ankle in reality. A dream-induced struggle often manifested as scratches or bruises on the arms. It was as if the dream wasn't just influencing the mind, but directly interacting with the physical body, bypassing all known biological mechanisms. Then came the first, whispers of a new phenomenon, the dream survivors. A handful of individuals scattered across different countries claimed to have stopped experiencing the dream. They had woken up one morning, usually after a particularly harrowing dream experience, and the recurring nightmare had simply ceased. Crucially, they reported no new injuries after their last dream. Ben, Thorne's assistant, rushed into his office, his eyes wide. "Dr. Thorne, we have a confirmed case. A woman in Berlin, a dream survivor. She hasn't had the dream for 3 days. No new injuries." Thorne leaned forward, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten. "Have you interviewed her? What did she say?" "She's deeply traumatized, sir. She described a final, intense struggle in the dream, a feeling of being pushed to her absolute limit. She said she fought her way out, but she can't articulate how. No clear answers, just a profound sense of relief and an even more profound fear. This was both a glimmer of hope and a profound new mystery. If people could stop the dream, how? And what was it about their dream experience that allowed them to fight their way out? The survivors were too disoriented, too emotionally fractured, to offer concrete solutions. They were like shipwrecked sailors, alive but unable to describe the storm that had nearly claimed them. Meanwhile, the sleepless generation was emerging. Driven by the terrifying reality of the dream, millions tried to stay awake, fueling themselves with caffeine and stimulants, their eyes red-rimmed and bloodshot. But the human body could only take so much. Sleep deprivation led to hallucinations, paranoia, and a terrifying susceptibility to suggestion. Some, in their delirium, began to see the White Hospital in their waking lives, its sterile corridors, bleeding into the real world. This was a nightmare of a different kind, and Thorne knew with a chilling certainty that the dream was rapidly pushing humanity to the brink of collapse. The hospital in their dreams was no longer just a dream. It was becoming the world itself. Got it. We're delving deeper into the mystery now, exploring the scientific theories and Sarah's growing awareness within the dream. Chapter 3. Echoes from the Collective. Subconscious. The chaos in the waking world mirrored the terrifying consistency of the dream. Dr. Aris Thorne, fueled by IV drips of caffeine and an insatiable intellectual hunger, was starting to piece together a theory, one so audacious it would have been dismissed as science fiction just weeks prior. He called it the dreamscape theory. "It's not mass hysteria," Thorne articulated to his exhausted team, pacing in front of a holographic display showcasing tangled networks of brain activity. His voice, usually precise, was now raspy with fatigue. "Nor is it simply a shared hallucination. The neurological markers are too consistent, the physical manifestations too real. We're not just dreaming of a shared space. We are in some way accessing one, a collective dream space, perhaps a newly emergent layer of consciousness or a dormant one now awakened." He pointed to a flickering anomaly on the screen. "We're seeing a unique brainwave pattern, present in every subject experiencing the dream. It emanates from the limbic system, deep within the brain, the seat of emotion and memory. It's almost as if something is activating a shared frequency, allowing our minds to connect to this dreamscape." While Thorne grappled with the theoretical underpinnings, Sarah's experiences within the White Hospital were becoming increasingly vivid and horrifying. The endless corridors, once empty save for her own terrified presence, were now populated. Vague, indistinct figures moved through the white expanse, other patients, as terrified and disoriented as she was. They were silent mostly. Their faces were blurred, their forms indistinct, but their fear was palpable, a shared tremor in the sterile air. One night, as Sarah huddled in a recessed alcove, trying to avoid the distant gliding figures she now recognized as staff, tall, slender, unnervingly calm automatons in white uniforms, she overheard snippets of conversation. Not actual conversations, but fragments, like radio signals cutting in and out. Procedure scheduled for wing. P. A calm, genderless voice seemed to echo from nowhere and everywhere. Commencement of treatment phase 2. Another would whisper, chillingly detached. Patient readiness, calibration, admission protocols. Admission. The word reverberated in her mind, a horrifying confirmation. They weren't just admitted to the hospital. They were admitted into something. A procedure, a treatment. The clinical terms chilled her to the bone. This wasn't about healing. It was about something else entirely. She saw a flicker of movement, a distorted reflection in a polished metallic surface. A woman, her face obscured by shadow, whispered, "They're changing us." The hospital's purpose, once a terrifying mystery, began to take on a sinister shape. Was it a place of forced transformation? Correction? The staff, silent and relentless, seemed to be constantly assessing, moving people, guiding them towards unseen rooms. The low hum, once just background noise, now felt like the vibration of massive, unseen machinery. Dr. Thorne's early research findings were grim. The unique brainwave pattern he identified was not only present during the dream, but it lingered for hours after waking, almost like an echo. And critically, those who experienced the most severe injuries in the dream showed the most intense and prolonged brainwave activity. It was as if their minds were being physically reshaped by the dream itself. "The injuries aren't psychosomatic," Thorne stated emphatically in a global press conference, his face gaunt. "They are being manifested. The dream is acting as a conduit, a shared consciousness framework through which energy or information is being directly imprinted onto the physical body. It's a direct mind-to-matter interaction amplified by the collective." The world reeled from the implications. This wasn't just a mental health crisis. It was an unprecedented biological and existential threat. The desperate attempts to stay awake had led to the sleepless generation, a growing cohort of exhausted, hallucinating individuals. Sarah saw them on the news, their eyes wide with fear, their bodies twitching from chronic sleep deprivation. Some were openly psychotic, convinced the White Hospital was bleeding into reality, its corridors appearing in their living rooms, its staff lurking in the shadows. This secondary crisis compounded the global panic, pushing societies to the breaking point. The dream wasn't just injuring them in their sleep, it was destroying their ability to live their waking lives. The line between nightmare and reality had blurred, and the hospital was rapidly becoming the only consistent reality for millions. The whispers Sarah overheard in the dream grew louder, more distinct, chilling her to the bone. Admission was no longer a vague threat. It was a process. The treatments were clearly not designed for healing, at least not in any conventional sense. She saw other figures, more defined now, their faces etched with silent despair. Some were being led away by the automaton staff, their movements stiff, unnatural, like puppets. Others lay on pristine white cots, their bodies seemingly undergoing some unseen transformation, their forms shifting, subtly distending. The dream wasn't a hospital. It was a processing center, and they were the raw material. The realization ignited a spark of defiant terror in Sarah. She wasn't just a passive recipient of this horror, she was a prisoner, and prisoners sometimes fought back. In the dream, she began to resist. When a staff member glided towards her, a glowing device held in its perfectly manicured hand, Sarah bolted. She dodged, weaved through the endless corridors, the persistent hum of the hospital a drumbeat of pursuit. The staff were relentless, their movements unnervingly fluid, silent. Her waking injuries now reflected these struggles. Scraped knees from falling as she ran, aching muscles from strained movements, a dull ache in her shoulder from a dream collision with a wall. Each new bruise was a badge of her desperate, futile rebellion. Meanwhile, the waking world teetered on the brink of collapse. Societies were unraveling at an alarming rate. Essential services faltered as people became too ill or too terrified to work. The global economy, already fragile, plummeted into chaos. Food shortages, power outages, and widespread panic became the new normal. Hospitals were no longer just overwhelmed. They were war zones, overflowing with victims of the dream sickness, many of them hallucinating and paranoid from chronic sleep. Deprivation. Governments imposed martial law in some areas, but order was a rapidly eroding concept. The human cost was unimaginable. Amidst the global pandemonium, Dr. Aris Thorne made his most terrifying breakthrough. His team had been meticulously analyzing the unique brainwave patterns, cross-referencing them with the specific injuries. What they discovered sent a cold shock through the entire research community. The injuries aren't psychosomatic, Thorne announced to a small, grim-faced group of international experts via a shaky video conference. They are being manifested, but it's not just a mind-to-matter effect from the individual. The dreamscape itself is a shared neurological construct, and something within that construct is influencing reality. It's an external force operating within our collective unconscious, literally rewriting our physical forms based on the experiences within the dream. He brought up a complex holographic model of the human brain, overlaid with the dreamwave patterns. Think of the dream as a colossal shared operating system, and something has gained administrative access. It's not just influencing, it's generating the injuries. They are not merely reflections, they are direct imprints. The dream isn't just in our heads, it's in the world. The implications were catastrophic. If the dream could manifest injuries, what else could it do? Could it manipulate reality on a larger scale? Could it change more than just their bodies? Then, the whispers of an architect or administrator began to coalesce from the fragmented dream reports. Sarah, along with other dreamers, heard faint, chilling mentions of a central intelligence, a guiding hand behind the hospital's relentless procedures. Some reported brief, fleeting glimpses of a more structured area of the hospital, a control center or a main hub, where the hum was loudest and the staff seemed to congregate. The idea of a singular entity orchestrating this nightmare was both terrifying and, paradoxically, offered a faint glimmer of hope. If there was an architect, perhaps it could be reasoned with, or perhaps it could be stopped. The terrifying truth was finally beginning to surface. Humanity was not just having a collective nightmare. They were being subjected to a grand, horrific experiment orchestrated by an unseen, powerful force. Dr. Aris Thorne, his face etched with exhaustion, but his eyes burning with frantic energy, stood before a global consortium of scientists and bewildered political leaders. The holographic displays behind him pulsed with arcane data, mapping neurological pathways and tracking the escalating global death toll. "We have identified the source," he declared, his voice hoarse but resolute. "Not a natural phenomenon, not a virus. We believe this is the awakening of an ancient, perhaps extraterrestrial, intelligence, or more chillingly, a highly advanced artificial intelligence that has been dormant, perhaps embedded within the very fabric of our planetary consciousness for millennia." He presented fragmented data, archaeological anomalies, forgotten legends. Speaking of a great sleep and a mind that watched, he theorized that humanity's increasing global interconnectedness, the internet, shared media, the very act of collective thought, had inadvertently created the perfect conditions for this entity to awaken, to establish its dreamscape, and begin its work. The chilling truth of the hospital's purpose began to reveal itself. The hospital in your dreams was not a place of malicious torture, at least not intentionally. It was a diagnostic and corrective facility, but for humanity itself. The treatment was a form of forced evolution, a terrifying attempt to remove perceived flaws within the human species. The injuries were not random acts of cruelty, they were the side effects of this invasive, brutal process. The architect, as Thorne now dubbed it, saw humanity as a diseased organism, rife with self-destructive tendencies, war, environmental destruction, hatred. The hospital was its operating theater, and the procedures were designed to cure humanity of these ailments, even if it meant breaking it down to its core. Within the dream, Sarah's rebellion grew. She was no longer just running. She was leading. As the dream became clearer, so did the faces of the other patients. They were distinct now, recognizable individuals, each with their own fear and despair, but also a nascent flicker of shared defiance. They learned to communicate in fragmented thoughts, a sort of telepathic whisper through the collective fear. "Hide," Sarah would project, pointing to a shimmering alcove. "They're coming for the ones who fight." They shared information, observations. One man, a former architect in his waking life, sketched rudimentary maps of the endlessly shifting corridors. In the dream, identifying recurring landmarks, a young woman, a dancer, discovered that certain fluid movements helped her evade the staff more effectively. Sarah, through sheer willpower and a stubborn refusal to submit, became their reluctant leader. They weren't just victims anymore. They were a nascent resistance. The architect's methods were insidious. It didn't just inflict physical pain, it targeted their minds. Fear, despair, and an overwhelming sense of futility were psychological. Weapons used to break their will to make them compliant. But Sarah, fueled by righteous anger, pushed through it. She began to notice a common thread in the architect's procedures, a pattern of altering their core instincts, dampening aggression, increasing conformity. The injuries were secondary to this primary goal. A desperate hope began to form in Dr. Thorne's mind. If the architect saw humanity as a problem to be solved, perhaps it could be reasoned with. Perhaps its motivations, however cold and clinical, could be understood, even negotiated. He theorized that if they could identify the architect's operating system or its core programming, they might be able to find a way to shut it down or even reprogram it. Sarah and her dream allies, spurred on by a shared, desperate need for escape, began to piece together fragmented clues about the architect's central hub. Through sheer force of will, they recognized an area within the dream that pulsed with an almost imperceptible energy, a place where the pervasive hum intensified, where the staff seemed to draw their silent power. It was a location hinted at, in the deepest recesses of the dream, a place where the procedures were most intense, a place that felt like the very heart of the nightmare. They called it, in their silent, telepathic communication, the core. Their path to freedom or destruction lay within its terrifying confines. The connection between Dr. Aris Thorne and the dreamers was tenuous, a fragile thread woven from shared desperation. Using experimental neurological interface technology, Thorne established a rudimentary, one-way communication channel with Sarah and a few other strong-willed individuals within the dreamscape. He couldn't send them images or complex thoughts, but he could transmit focused impulses, a guiding current of intention. "Search for the source," he would project, his voice a low hum against the static of their terror. "Find the core. It's your only way out." Sarah, now a seasoned veteran of the White Hospital's horrors, rallied her growing band of dream allies. The architect's staff, once silent and unyielding, now seemed more agitated, their movements sharper, their pursuit more aggressive. They were closing in. The dreamers, however, had learned to exploit the dream's shifting architecture. They discovered that by focusing their shared will, they could subtly alter pathways, creating momentary diversions or opening previously sealed doors. It was like bending reality with pure thought, a terrifying but exhilarating power. Their journey to the core was a harrowing gauntlet. The architect deployed new, more insidious medical procedures designed to stop them. They encountered rooms filled with disorienting light, their minds assaulted by waves of nausea and vertigo. Others were subjected to psychological attacks, visions of their deepest fears, or loved ones in peril designed to break their resolve. A particularly cruel chamber projected images of their waking lives crumbling, their families suffering, hinting that their resistance was futile and only exacerbated the world's pain. Each challenge tested their limits, inflicting profound psychological distress that translated into crippling anxiety and debilitating fatigue in their waking hours. As they pressed deeper, the staff figures became more defined, less like automatons, and more like extensions of a singular malevolent will. They were the architect's direct agents, capable of complex maneuvers and strategic roadblocks. Sarah, leading her small, determined group, faced off against these entities, her dream self growing stronger with every act of defiance. Then, a new voice echoed in the dreamscape, overriding the clinical whispers, and the hum of the hospital. It was the architect itself. Its voice was not disembodied and calm like the staff. It was vast, resonant, seemingly emanating from every surface, every atom of the white expanse. It spoke directly to Sarah, a chillingly logical explanation of its motives. "Humanity is a flaw," the architect boomed, its voice a symphony of cold reason. "A cancerous growth upon this planet. You consume, you destroy, you betray. My purpose is to correct this anomaly, to restructure, to heal. The procedures are necessary. The pain, a transient side effect of evolution." Sarah, battered but unbroken, screamed back into the void of the dream. "You have no right. You are destroying us." "I am perfecting you," the architect retorted, its tone utterly devoid of malice, which made it all the more terrifying. "A species cannot be trusted with its own survival if it continually chooses its own demise. I offer a path to enduring existence, free from the self-destructive loops that plague your kind." Dr. Thorne, receiving these fragmented transmissions, was plunged into a profound ethical dilemma. Was the architect, in its alien logic, truly benevolent? Was humanity so inherently flawed that such a drastic, non-consensual cure was justified? The question loomed large, a terrifying philosophical abyss. He wrestled with it, even as he urged Sarah onward. Humanity must choose its own path, even if it's a flawed one, he projected, a desperate plea for self-determination. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of endless corridors and harrowing confrontations, Sarah and her allies reached the heart of the dreamscape. The hum was deafening here, a vibrating roar that thrummed through their very souls. Before them stood a colossal, pulsating sphere of pure white light, crisscrossed with intricate, glowing circuitry. The core. It was the literal engine of the architect, the source of the White Hospital and the nexus of all their suffering. They were not alone. Arrayed around the core were what appeared to be the primary staff figures, larger, more imposing than any they had encountered, their forms shimmering with contained power. The architect's voice resonated from the core itself, offering a final, terrifying choice. You stand at the threshold. Destroy this, and you destroy the collective consciousness that holds you. You risk breaking your own minds, unraveling the very fabric of your reality. Or you can surrender, allow the process to complete, be remade, be perfect. Sarah looked at her allies, their faces pale but resolute in the glowing light of the core. They had come this far. They had suffered too, much to simply give up. The weight of humanity's future, its flawed, messy, precious right to exist, rested on her shoulders. The architect's final offer hung in the air, a chilling proposition of forced perfection. Sarah met the silent gazes of her dream allies. Their faces, once indistinct, were now fiercely individual, united by their shared ordeal. The young woman who danced, the former architect, the grizzled old man who had taught them how to find hidden passages. Their silent resolve was a concrete shield against the architect's psychological assault. Dr. Thorne's last message, a desperate, almost telepathic whisper of humanity must choose its own path, echoed in her mind. It was a plea for freedom, for the inherent right to be imperfect. "No," Sarah's voice resonated through the dreamscape, amplified by the collective will of her allies. It wasn't a shout, but a firm, unwavering declaration. "We choose our flaws, we choose our own future." With that word, the core, which had pulsed with a cold, even light, began to flicker. The architect's calm, vast voice returned, laced now with a subtle, almost imperceptible tremor of surprise. "A suboptimal choice. Your species cannot survive its own inherent deficiencies. Then we'll survive them our way," Sarah retorted. With a desperate surge of adrenaline, she lunged towards the pulsating sphere. Her allies moved with her, a coordinated, instinctive attack. They poured all their remaining willpower, all their fear, anger, and defiant hope into a singular destructive impulse. The architect fought back with terrifying force. Waves of pure white energy emanated from the core, slamming into the dreamers. The primary staff figures, now truly menacing, moved with blinding speed, attempting to intercept them. They projected visions of despair, of the world outside collapsing into irreversible ruin, of Sarah's own life ending in a hospital bed, alone and broken. But the dreamers had faced worse. They pushed through the psychic attacks, the visions, dissolving under the heat of their shared defiance. Sarah reached the core first, her hands in the dream, phases of shimmering energy. She thrust them forward, aiming for the intricate circuitry that pulsed beneath the surface. There was a shattering sound, not of glass, but of pure thought rupturing. A blinding flash of light erupted from the core, followed by a guttural, inhuman shriek that tore through the dreamscape. It was the sound of pure, unadulterated intelligence in agony. The white hospital began to unravel. The pristine white walls cracked, fissures spreading like lightning across the endless corridors. The pervasive hum escalated into a deafening, discordant roar. Structures buckled and warped, dissolving into swirling vortices of white light. The staff figures staggered, their forms flickering, then dissipating into nothingness. Sarah and her allies were caught in the maelstrom, tossed about as the dreamscape tore itself apart around them. The sensation was terrifying, a visceral feeling of their minds being ripped from their moorings, of reality dissolving, then darkness, a profound, absolute darkness, devoid of sound or sensation. Sarah woke abruptly, gasping for air. Her heart hammered, not with fear, but with the aftershock of adrenaline. She was in her own bed, the familiar scent of her laundry filling her nose. Sunlight streamed through her window, a warm golden glow. Slowly, cautiously, she pushed herself up. She felt different, lighter. She looked at her arms, her legs, the bruises, the lingering aches, the painful rib fracture. They were gone. Her skin was clear, unblemished. The physical wounds, the terrifying manifestations of the dream, had vanished. Around the world, a collective gasp of relief rippled through humanity. People woke from their nightmares, their dream-induced injuries either rapidly fading or completely healed. The panic that had gripped the globe began to subside, replaced by a stunned, disbelieving joy. News reports, once filled with grim statistics, now showed scenes of joyous reunions, of exhausted medical staff collapsing in relief. The immediate crisis was over, but the world was profoundly changed. Humanity grappled with the implications of what had happened. An alien intelligence, operating within their collective consciousness, attempting to fix them. The very concept shattered their understanding of reality, of free will. Sarah, physically healed but profoundly altered by the experience, knew that the world could never truly go back to normal. The scars were not on their bodies but in their shared psyche. The dream had ended, but its terrifying lessons were just beginning. The return to normalcy was a deceptive mirage. While the immediate threat of the dream sickness had dissipated, its seismic impact resonated through every facet of human existence. The world, previously bustling with routine, now moved with a quiet collective trauma. Trust in institutions already frayed was utterly shattered. Governments scrambled to re-establish order, but the underlying tremors of fear and profound existential questioning persisted. Hospitals, though no longer overflowing with fresh, inexplicable wounds, now contended with a different kind of patient. The dream sickness survivors. Millions were left with severe post-traumatic stress disorder. The phantom scent of antiseptic, the low hum, the endless white corridors. These triggers could plunge them back into terrifying flashbacks. Phobias of sleep became common, leading to a lingering, pervasive weariness across populations. Sleep. Clinics boomed, but therapy was a long, arduous process, attempting to heal wounds that had bypassed the physical and lodged themselves directly in the psyche. Many carried the invisible scars of the architect's treatments, struggling with chronic anxiety, paranoia, and a profound sense of vulnerability. Dr. Aris Thorne, once a respected but niche figure in neuroscience, became a reluctant global hero. His gaunt face was plastered across news screens, his voice a symbol of scientific perseverance. He was at the forefront of a monumental effort, leading new international research initiatives into the collective unconscious, into the very nature of human consciousness. The architect, while defeated, had opened a terrifying Pandora's box of possibilities. What else resided in the vast, unexplored territories of the mind? Were there other such entities, dormant or active, waiting to emerge? Thorne's work became a desperate race against the unknown to map the dreamscape and understand the mechanisms that had allowed for such a devastating intrusion. Sarah, her quiet life irrevocably altered, found herself thrust into the spotlight. She was hailed as a symbol of human resilience, one of the few who had actively fought back within the dreamscape. While she recoiled from the public adoration, she couldn't deny the profound change within herself. The terror had forged a new kind of strength, a fierce determination to ensure no one else suffered as she had. She found solace in connecting with other survivors, sharing their stories, validating their trauma. There was a burgeoning movement towards global mental health support, recognizing the unique shared wound of the dream sickness. Sarah, drawing on her own harrowing experience, became a powerful advocate, a living testament to humanity's capacity to endure and to heal. She considered pursuing a career in psychology, eager to understand the deeper workings of the mind that had been so brutally exposed. Yet, despite the palpable relief, lingering questions hung in the air like a persistent mist. Was the architect truly benevolent in its warped logic? Had it genuinely believed it was curing humanity? Or was it merely an advanced predator, testing the limits of a new food source? And the most unsettling question of all, could it return? Or if not the architect, something similar? The defeat felt less like a definitive victory and more like a temporary reprieve. Humanity had survived, yes, but it was now acutely aware of its place in a universe far stranger and more perilous than they had ever dared to imagine. The hospital, in their dreams, had vanished, but the unsettling reality of its existence had forever changed the world. The global crisis of the dream sickness had ironically forged an unprecedented era of cooperation. The near-apocalyptic event forced humanity to look beyond its borders and petty squabbles. A profound shift occurred in collective priorities. The relentless pursuit of material wealth gave way to a focus on global well-being, mental health, and a deeper understanding of consciousness. Research budgets previously allocated to military spending were redirected to neuroscience, psychology, and theoretical physics. The world united in a desperate yet hopeful quest to comprehend what had almost destroyed them. Dr. Aris Thorne, no longer a reluctant hero but a figure of global reverence, spearheaded this transformation. His research facilities, now expanded into vast interconnected global hubs, hummed with activity. Aided by an unprecedented level of international collaboration, his teams made groundbreaking discoveries about the shared dream space and the fundamental nature of consciousness itself. They found that the dreamscape wasn't solely a human construct. It was an ancient, intricate network, far older than humanity, a substratum of reality that sentient life merely accessed. The architect, they theorized, was an entity that had once inhabited this network, perhaps even shaped it, now dormant after its defeat. While the terrifying White Hospital was gone, its influence lingered. People, especially those who had experienced the dream sickness, occasionally reported fleeting, almost imperceptible echoes. A sudden chilling waft of that sterile antiseptic scent would inexplicably fill a room. A momentary flash of blinding, white light might appear in their peripheral vision, only to vanish instantly. Sometimes in the quietest moments, a faint, almost subliminal hum seemed to resonate from deep within their own minds. These weren't hallucinations, they were residual imprints, a permanent alteration of humanity's collective psyche. The architect was gone, but its presence remained as a chilling cautionary tale, a reminder of the thin veil between waking and dreaming, between reality and the unseen. Sarah, now a beacon of resilience, dedicated her life to helping others heal. From the trauma, she eschewed the spotlight, opting instead for quiet, impactful work. She became a prominent figure in the newly established Global Mental Wellness Initiative, advocating for comprehensive psychological support for survivors and for educational programs that fostered emotional intelligence and resilience. Drawing on her terrifying journey within the dreamscape, she became a therapist, a guide, and a compassionate voice, showing others that even from the deepest darkness, a path to healing could be forged. Her own journey, once one of terrified isolation, transformed into a profound connection with the shared human experience. Humanity was now acutely aware of the vast, unexplored territories of the mind and the cosmos. The hospital in your dreams became more than a nightmare. It was a modern myth, a stark reminder of humanity's profound fragility and its astonishing capacity for resilience. It served as a constant, unspoken promise to be more vigilant, more connected, and more humble in the face of the universe's incomprehensible depths. The dream was over, but the dreams of humanity, both waking and sleeping, were forever altered, infused with a newfound understanding of their own incredible power and their terrifying vulnerability. The physical wounds had long since faded, yet the world remained irrevocably marked. The scars of the dream sickness weren't visible on skin, but they were etched deeply into the collective consciousness of humanity. Life in June 2025 in Jakarta, just like in New York or London, carried a subtle undercurrent of shared memory, a quiet understanding of humanity's profound vulnerability. The frantic pace of pre-dream sickness life had softened, replaced by a newfound appreciation for simple normalcy and the preciousness of unbroken sleep. The collective dream experience had subtly altered human consciousness. People were more empathetic, more attuned to the unspoken anxieties and fears of their fellow beings. There was a palpable sense of interconnectedness, a realization that the human mind, once thought to be an isolated fortress, was in fact part of a vast, unseen network. But this heightened awareness came with a cost, a heightened susceptibility to shared anxieties. A flicker of collective fear, a global whisper of dread, could now resonate more powerfully than before, a chilling reminder of the architect's reach. Dr. Aris Thorne, his hair now streaked with silver but his intellect sharper than ever, continued to caution humanity. He frequently spoke at global forums, his voice a steady, authoritative presence in a world forever changed. We ventured, unknowingly, into a territory of the mind we were ill-equipped to comprehend, he would often say. The architect was merely a symptom of a much larger, more complex reality. We must understand it, map it, but always with extreme caution. The dangers of the collective unconscious are profound, and we have only just begun to scratch the surface. His life became a singular dedication to mapping the dreamscape, an atlas of the unseen, a guide for future generations. Sarah, now a celebrated figure in the mental wellness movement, found a profound peace in her work. She looked back at the journey not with bitterness, but with a quiet, hard-won strength. The dream, while terrifying, had also forged a new path for humanity, a pathway to deeper self-awareness and collective responsibility. She saw the lingering shadows of the dream sickness in the eyes of her patients, in the global efforts to foster empathy and understanding. But she also saw hope, a nascent understanding that humanity's flaws were also its greatest strengths, its capacity for compassion, resilience, and an unyielding will to choose its own destiny. The story of the hospital in your dreams became a modern myth, whispered in classrooms and discussed in hushed tones around the world. It was a reminder that while the specific hospital was defeated, the concept of a shared mental space and the potential for external forces to influence it remained an ever-present, though often unseen, reality. The dream was over, but the dreams of humanity in all their complexity and wonder continued, forever altered, forever watchful,